basic.
Well, I know that was
necessity.
something
We
we
got
talked
it
to
before.
there.
Yeah.
With your house,
Well, I don't
it's,
wanna give up my spot.
You know,
So
why
I'm
my
like,
girls
it's
is
all
on
summer.
their house.
Doesn't happen very often.
well, and then here's wood, so wood was their spot. Mountain spot, come to us, and then we don't have
I didn't even
a
check.
Expire test days.
Well, really,
That's all that I
because I
had.
don't consider it, because once we
So what
start
I-
doing
what
it,
is this thing?
now,
Oh,
My
yeah.
liquid's gone.
so that's,
So that's a little expired.
start the process of efficiency.
I just thought it
It's
was-
going. We just need stuff that people don't touch.
And we apologize for the technical difficulty with our sound, but now that we have that figured out, we'll resume our meeting. We are now at item 9.2, certifying the maximum preliminary levy for 2025, page 26.
Remember, we set this as at the maximum. It does include things for our bond there. That doesn't mean we can't adjust it in December.
Jeremy, this is a question for you.
Yep.
So, looking at the levy, the largest increase I see is on the voter-approved debt service.
Yep.
So, can you just, for transparency, explain that piece?
So that is what they'll levy for the first bond payment for the new referendum.
Okay, so that will include that cost.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's 110, right? 105%.
They claw it back all year, but which ends up carrying forward and forward and forward. Yep.
So yeah, not much change in general fund. We had a change in the community service fund, which usually is the pool. So there were less expenses there this year. But yeah, we'll recommend approving the maximum.
Okay. Any other discussion? Not, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's levy.
Second by Zumble.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Carries. 9.3, designate truth and taxation hearing dates for December 8th, 2025 at 6 p.m.
Motion to make that designation by Zumble.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion on that meeting date? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no? That carries. Adoption of the revised resolution for approving the fiscal year 27 long-term facilities maintenance 10-year plan.
So a little background there. So MDE had reached out to us because we usually show quite a deficit in the long-term facilities 10-year plan because we have so many where we have, I think we have the track in there and lockers and windows and you name it. So in conversation with Sarah Miller from MDE, once we passed the referendum for the building, we took a lot of that off, so it looks more favorable for us as a district. So this is just the revised 10-year plan. And she wanted us to just formality do a revised resolution.
Okay. Being that we're getting a new building, that seems fair. Any questions or discussion on that? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the revised resolution?
A motion to approve.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, being this is a resolution, we'll do a roll call vote. Start with Director Winter.
Ron Winter, yes.
Amanda Lisi, yes.
Laura Christensen, yes.
Sonia Peterson, yes?
Jeremy LeBlanc, yes.
Pat Zumble, yes.
Abby Richter, yes.
Motion carries. All All right, next is the adoption of the resolution relating to general obligation school building funds. Okay, all right, so we have Michael from PMA and the supporting gentleman.
Thank you, happy to be here, Michael Hart with PMA. You'll notice that we have a new name since this summer, we're PTMA now. So that you'll see that we're the same people, the same company with a slightly different name. We added one consonant there. My colleague Steve Pumper and Bill Manazzi here. I know you've met Steve before. Bill is new to our team and he's along for the ride tonight. So I'm going to go through a set of slides about the bond sale process and just start with, congratulations on a successful vote. It was, overwhelming to see that kind of support from your community and you thought the hard work was before the election and now we really get going. Denise, can you flip forward here for me?
It flipped on my screen, there we go.
Okay.
Just a little delay.
So my goal tonight is just to talk about what's next in terms of the process of the financing and what that process looks like going forward. We also have done some detailed analysis about what, you have authority to sell $74.395 million as a school board. It does not mean you have to do it all at once. And so we've done some financial analysis about when and how we do that. That started with information that we received from your architect and construction management partners in terms of how you expect to spend the funds. Because it's a phased project, where you're doing different parts at different times, all the money and all the construction isn't gonna happen all at one time. It's gonna happen over a period of 3+ years. And so that's part of our analysis when we look at that. And then talk about a timeline related to the first steps in action for the bond issue. And this will lead ultimately to the action item that you have a resolution to proceed forward with that first step in the process. So I always like to start with, okay, we told your public this was gonna be in terms of tax impact and estimates. It's been estimates all the way through with the best information that we have. And so what are our current estimates versus the REC, that stands for review and comment. So that was really the set of numbers that we established in the spring as we went into the process with the referendum this summer. As you look at this, we are expecting that we will have a total debt service as principal and interest on the bond less than, it's about $1 million less than what that review and comment is. And based upon, depending upon how much bond premium we receive, you'll have at least the $74.395 million to work with in terms of construction on day one. We also expect to earn some interest on the money once it's received. So it will be received in an account, and it'll be spent as the construction period happens. All of the interest earned on that money is required to be put back into the project. So it cannot go into the general fund or other funds of the school district. I think it's also important just to reiterate at this point in time, this money will be segregated. It will be different than your general funds of the school district, and it has to be that way. The same way with the levy that you just made, the $4.5 million increase or approximately on your debt service levy, that comes into the district's debt service fund in Fund 7 and is held there for the only purpose of paying back the bonds. And I think it's important for the public to know and you to know too. So then the total project funds, obviously the interest earnings is still an estimate this time too, but that we're expecting is about $79 million there, that bottom line on this chart. So the next question is whether or not we split this into two issues or to do it all in one. So that first estimate is we just kind of take the same approach and we did all of the $74.395 million at one time this fall as you start to have some bills, as you engage in the design process and ultimately the construction starting next year. There are some advantages to splitting it into two bond issues. One, you don't need the money all at once, and so by splitting it up into two, there's some portion of the bond issue that we're not paying interest out on, so that will save you interest. And that interest savings is taxpayer savings at the end of the day. So it means less future debt service levy on your school's taxpayer. It gives you some some flexibility through the process in terms of how the project goes forward, in terms of the bond structure, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, kind of the opposing force here is that because you don't have all the money at once, you earn less interest on the money that's sitting in your account. So you would have less of money available for the project at the end of the day by splitting it into two. There's also some increased cost in terms of going through the process twice. I want to make sure we're very transparent about that, that if we do the bond issue twice, we do our work twice, which means you will pay us more at the end of the day. But there's also attorneys and rating agency fees. There's a lot of professional help when you go through the bond market. But kind of going back to that first one, the total debt service is significantly less. And so we put on, which is why it should be considered. The next slide shows some of the more detailed financial analysis on this. And so the total principal and interest here in these numbers by splitting it into two, and this is if interest rates do not change, and we're going to talk about the impact of that in a moment. But in this two-issue approach would be that we sell $40 million worth of the bonds this fall and do the remaining $34.395 million 2 years from now. As the project spending schedule suggests, you'll spend about $40 million within the first 2 years of time. But the total principal and interest, the total amount that you pay back with interest would be over $12 million less over that time. So it's a significant difference. And then on the bottom, you would have about, our projection is the total interest earnings would go from 4.2 down to about $2 million. But when you net that out with some of the other parts of the bond issue, we'd expect you'd have about 1.7 million less for construction. So you have 1.7 million less to pick up $12 million for your taxpayers on the other end. Now, we've made a lot of assumptions in this, but they're, I think, the most fair that we possibly could at this point in time in terms of looking at it. And so the next slide shows a little bit of what we think about with the bond structure. So I'm sure you all remember that through the bond process, this was anticipated to be a 29-year bond issue, which is kind of the length that you're allowed to under state statute. And so these bars represent a payment for each year going forward out to 2051. The green bar there is what your debt service payment is in the current fiscal year, which you would have levied for taxes payable in 25. And then the first blue one is the increase. And so with a single issue, there's higher levels of debt service. And the other approach that we're taking here is to put this kind of the savings in the debt service on the back end in the last 10 years. So it's the first 20 years of payments is right in line, exactly in line with what we told the taxpayers it would be in terms of the tax impact. And then there's a reduction for the last 10 years, which gives you some space to think about what might be needed in this facility. We would like it to be new forever, but it will not be new forever in terms of the new facility. So in talking with Rich and Jeremy, we thought this was the best approach in terms of giving future school boards the flexibility with this. The other options really would be you could maybe take a year or two off the back and make it slightly shorter, but have the same payments all the way out. Or we could reduce all of the payments by a little bit, so there'd be a slightly lower tax increase today. Which sounds kind of nice, but I do think this kind of approach where you have that drop down really is the best long-term view for maintaining your facilities now and into the future. Does that make sense?
It's kind of a choose your own amortization.
You can, yes. So this is different than a mortgage, which many of us are familiar with, where you have the same payment for 15, 20, or 30 years. We get to decide how much principal we put into each year when we're doing a bond issue. There's some boundaries around that, but we have some flexibility with that. And so that's what we're looking at here. And you can see, obviously, there's a big difference in the size of that drop between doing one issue and doing two, which is where that $12 million of savings is.
savings, so looking at the savings, that's based on what we know today or project interest rates to be at that time, correct?
Yes.
When we issue that next 34 million. So if interest rates rise considerably, that savings could go away.
Yes, so actually, you're writing the story for me. The next slide, Denise. It's a great question. So this estimates that, markets are static. If markets are static, they're the same in 2 years. And things are always changing, they're changing every day. The district, would have less project funds, but significantly lower debt service. But future markets are known. If interest rates could rise and investment rates could fall, which would reduce your investment earnings too. So I think that the easiest way to think about this is we put that $12 million into a percentage amount. And to say, if interest rates rise by more than 1.05%, it would have been better to do it all today. If they rise by less than that, or they could certainly fall in that 2-year period of time too, you would be better off. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have $12 million of savings if they went up 0.5%, but you would still be better off by splitting it into two. So that risk is a real risk. It's not something that we can know today.
So 1.05 is the break even, where
Yes.
it would be just as bad as good.
Right. You have the same payments over that
Right.
2090 period of time.
And we would gain about the same amount of interest versus the cost.
Yeah,
Like
so
our total,
you would, if you split it into two and it went up at 1.05%, you'd be paying that $12 million, and you would have lost the interest earnings in terms of the project for that.
so the interest earnings would be completely wiped out with that 1.5.
Well, this 1.05 is just looking at the payments side
Just
of
the
it.
payment side, okay.
The interest component of it, so there was like a difference between 4.2 and $2 million. You'd be kind of stuck into that $2 million
Range.
range, yeah,
But we still would have incurred the higher cost, so
right.
we'd take a bigger hit
Yeah.
of that, what we've netted.
So there definitely is, there's a real risk to that. Now, if markets were starting to rise, there's nothing that requires us to sell the second part of this 2 years from now. We could do it earlier or, at a different time. Certainly we would be monitoring the spending on the project too, because it's just an estimate. And sometimes it's better, when things go really well, actually, the spending happens faster than what they expect. So we would be monitoring that too. And that's definitely not locked in stone.
So we're not married to like a date for that second half, if that's what we chose?
Correct, yes.
However, the sooner we would sell the second half of that bond, the less savings we would have.
Yes.
Well, depending on the market.
Yes.
Right. Because the rates could go up, but bond market could, our investment rates could change too.
If it
So,
remains static.
yeah.
I just wanted to say too, that the reason that we picked the numbers that we picked right now is really based on how much money do you need for the first 2 years. So you need roughly $40 million. This is again based on your architects and engineers. And that's where we're coming up with the dollar amount. So I just kind of picked out of thin air.
So if we were to sell one bond right now for all of the money, what are the limitations on restructuring as far as time frame? If say the market got way better and we
Yeah.
wanted to restructure, what are our limitations on that?
That's a great question. So, when you sell a bond issue, you are gonna guarantee to the bondholder that you're paying a certain interest rate for a certain period of time. So this is different than a mortgage also in that we cannot prepay the bonds whenever we want. And typically that period of time is between 8 and 10 years from the date. So, it's probably gonna be in that between now and 9 years from now, we're not gonna be able to change the interest rate. And even after that point in time, it would be your choice to change the interest rate. It's not a variable rate. It's gonna be fixed all the way through, but you could refinance or restructure, if that was the will of the board at that time.
And there would be cost when we do that at that time.
Yes. So we put a slide in here that just kind of summarizes what we talked about. If you do one issue, the interest rates are locked this fall, there's less market risk. The project funding amount would be known a little earlier in the planning process. When in terms of the more specific amount, we know generally how much money there's gonna be there, but a little bit more specific. Two issues, there's a potential to have less interest costs subject to that interest rate risk. And there are some costs, all of the additional cost of issuance are built into the numbers that we provided in the break even. In terms of the process forward, and this would really be the same in either case, whether or not you do the single issue or both issues, there's a calendar on the next slide that shows the steps here. And you've already started to incur some expense related to design, and that will be the heavy part of the process in the coming months. But there's a resolution tonight for your consideration to proceed forward with this first sale, either at the $40 million number, the 74.395, or something different. We are in the process of beginning to develop the documents that represent the school district in the bond market. The primary one of those is what we call an official statement or prospectus. The school district will have a rating call in a couple weeks' time with a bond rating agency that will write a third-party opinion of the school district's ability to repay the bonds. This is an important part of the process in order to reduce the overall cost of the borrowing. And then this timeline proposes doing the bond pricing. This is the date on November 5th, where we would take bids on the bonds from potential underwriters. So it's a competitive bidding process, and we would award the bid to the most favorable bid at that time. The school board would ratify that sale process on November 10th at your regular meeting, and the funds would be received the first week of December. And any expense you have already had, or between now and then, you can reimburse yourself for when that money is received. So the action that needs to be taken to initiate this is detailed on the next slide, and it's a resolution that's been prepared, was in your packet, and it's prepared by the attorneys at Dorsey Whitney, who helped with the election documents and are serving as the school district's bond counsel. But the resolution allows for the submission to the State Credit Enhancement Program. This is a program of the state of Minnesota. Will pay back the bonds if for any case the school district cannot. We don't expect you to need this, but it does significantly reduce your interest rate because it's the taxing power of the state of Minnesota is ultimately backing the payment to the bondholders. It allows for reimbursement, which we talked about, and then the last thing is that it allows proceeding forward with the sale subject to certain parameters. And those parameters really mean that the full school board is providing authority to two individuals to execute the bond sale as long as certain parameters are hit. And those two individuals would be the superintendent or the finance director, so one administrator and then one officer of the school board would be the two individuals that can execute it. The resolution as it's drafted in front of you would be the true interest rate or interest cost cannot exceed 6%. The maximum amount could not exceed 40 million. We can change that, of course. This authority would be good through the end of the year. And again, the full board would ratify this at your next meeting. Now, in terms of the interest rate, it's our job as your municipal advisor to help you get the lowest possible cost on the borrowing, and that's what we will intend to do. This is really just a ceiling in terms of these individuals do not have the authority without the full board's action beyond that parameter. And then one final slide, kind of what happens after you receive the money, is that the funds are available to spend, and as the project expenditures come due, we will work with and be in contact continually through the project with your construction partners and the district administrators to understand how the project money is being spent and the timelines that we expect that to be spent on. It will help you make fixed rate investments to earn as much money as we can within reasonable, very safe investments for that. Those funds, those investment earnings can enhance the project budget. And then we are talking about tax exempt bond issues here, which is a significant federal tax subsidy that lowers your interest rate, and the federal government, does have a lot of regulation around it through the IRS, and those regulations are what we call arbitrage rebate regulation. And they require significant monitoring, and we'll help you with that process to make sure you stay in compliance and, overall maintain that tax exemption on the bonds. So that's what I had in the presentation, and happy to help facilitate further discussion about, what the right path forward is for you with the options. I think, there's more than one right way to proceed. As we looked at it, in our discussion, it seemed to make sense to at least consider splitting it into to multiple issues, given the potential savings, but the board needs to be comfortable with the risk that creates too.
Is there a period of time we have to wait to do the second issuance? Once we've issued the third, like minimum of 6 months, is there a minimum that we have to wait?
No, there's nothing that specifically that requires that. And part of where the savings comes from though, is that the $40 million on the front end, if we issue that, there's 2 tax levy years where we're not paying for the second issue, we're only paying for the first issue, so we can actually pay a sizable amount of principal off on the first issue right away. And so it complicates it a little bit if we want to come back to the market within the first, especially within the first year.
Okay.
Not impossible, but it complicates the story some.
I'm just wondering if
Yep.
something happens and things start to go nuts, and that really changes, would we be stuck having to, what those consequences would be?
For sure.
So you talked about having 3 years to spend the money,
Yeah.
but we talked about getting an extension up to 5 years, correct?
Yeah, so there are some part of the IRS regulations around it is that they do not want the school district to be a bank where you borrow the money and sit on it. They want you to spend the money for public purposes. That's really the intent, the spirit of the rules. And so, generally, you're gonna make a certification that substantially all the money's gonna be spent in 3 years. Your project is gonna last a little bit longer than 3 years based upon from where we sit today, based upon the current estimates. And so, there is an exception that we can get by having a certified architect on the front end sign a certification saying, here's why it's gonna take longer than 3 years, and you have a very good reason. It's a very easy, explainable reason that you cannot do all the construction at once because of the needs of educating the, kids and moving them around with the phase project. So that's something we can do if, and that would extend the timeline to 5 years, and it should all be spent in 5 years based upon what we know.
And if we have that letter, that's a given, we don't have to have it approved or authorized before we proceed.
No, there's no approval
Okay.
process with the IRS. It's more it's very similar to personal income taxes. It's not approval, it's an audit-based compliance system.
Gotcha.
It's forgiveness ahead of time, right?
Until they audit you, and then you want to have paperwork in place.
Plan to get permit.
Yeah.
And that's when you call us, and we make sure we show you all the paperwork, so.
It's a lot to digest. Thoughts of the board?
The resolution placed in front of you is for 2.
For 2?
To issue it in 2 different.
You certainly could adjust that though. with
Yep.
this.
We could easily, if you're more comfortable with 1.
$12 million in savings, just for an extra 1.7 million, that's a big difference. But if the market goes hairy, that's also a risk. That could go away quick.
There's a lot of buts on that. So you just need a motion from us, correct? the next step?
Yeah, I guess we're looking for a motion for a resolution on which direction we would like to go. So, I guess I'd like to, if anybody's got any input one way or the other, I'd like to share it now.
Quick question on the principal prepayment, how does that work exactly to save that 12 million with the 2 years of principal?
Well, so when we
Dumb it
issue,
down for a third grader or something.
yeah, I mean, when we issue the bond, we say how much principal we're gonna pay back in those first 2 years, and we can't change that once we issue this first bond. And so it's fixed in place, and so,
No matter what the interest rate is,
right,
we pay that plus what the interest would be for those
Yes.
2 years.
yes,
So we say we're gonna pay $1 million in principal, we pay, can we do that with the single issuance as well, or?
well, we can pay more principal off because we're not paying interest on the other
The
34
second
million.
34 million,
Yeah.
right,
And so
to
you could,
keep the payment level the
yeah,
same,
if you wanted to
based on
pay
what you
more
told.
principal off, then the tax levy you made
we'd be
would not be
increasing the
sufficient.
payment.
Yeah.
So this is using the same payment we initially were,
So
got it.
can you go back to this slide and
I was just trying to figure out where all the savings were coming from and how,
Yeah.
I got it now, though, I think.
yeah, so you can see like the two different colored blues represent the two different issues, and you can see
Yeah.
there's a little bit darker blue has the larger payment, so we're paying a couple $1 million off in each of those years of principal instead of mostly being.
Right, because it would have been eaten up by
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's where a fair amount of the savings comes from, is we just don't have that principal.
And that additional principal buys you a reduction in payments in the last year, so.
Yeah, really, you know, if rates hold steady, the $12 million of savings probably buys you the next project, iteration of projects that needs to be done 18 or 20 years from now, without raising taxes. You know, that $12 million extra worth of that, which would be, that would be the most typical way that school districts think about this.
We have that to repair some roofs or whatever we need.
Yeah. Because the building as a whole would last far longer than 30 years, but there will be parts of it that will deteriorate.
Roof.
Each
Carpet.
Cardboard.
Yeah,
The roof blows
standard.
off. So when the roof blows off.
Last insurance.
Doesn't happen.
That's a good one.
It's not gonna happen.
So looking at the language itself in the resolution, one, it still says PMA, not PTMA. We have to update that, correct? Or is that your official?
It's accurate the way it is in here, so. Yeah, I could give you the long explanation, but PMA Securities is the way it's supposed to be.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
And then it also says the 74,395,000. So is this one resolution authorizing us to sell the bond in the future? Or we would have to do a second resolution at that time?
Second one.
So then will the amount in this resolution have to be the 40 million if that's what we're choosing to do at this point?
So I see where are you seeing this, the 74.395 is on the top of the
Yeah,
fourth page.
yes.
Okay, so that's just referencing the total project
Okay.
size. So really, if you look at section 2, this is where the
Oh, there it is.
parameters
There it is,
are
okay.
outlined, so I'll just read it for the whole.
Yep.
In consultation with PMA, the superintendent or finance director and any board officer are hereby authorized to approve the sale for the bonds, provided that the aggregate principal amount of the bonds will not exceed 40 million and the true interest cost shall not exceed 6%.
I missed that amount. Back to the board. What are your thoughts?
I'll be the first one to say I make a motion to do the two the issuance of two.
All right, we have a motion of issuance of 2 bonds, starting with 40 million bond first.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Plenty of time for questions here. So these guys.
Maybe this is-
As well explained.
That motion was for the resolution, to approve the resolution, correct?
Yes.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? We'll start with a roll call vote. We'll start with Director Richter.
Patty Richter, yes.
Matt Semple, yes.
Jeremy LeBlanc, yes.
Sonia Peterson, yes.
Laurel Christensen, yes.
Amanda Lacy, yes.
Ron Winter, yes.
I thank you to you, gentlemen. Appreciate all the hard work. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so much. We'll be back
Yes.
Good.
In 2 years, hopefully.
oh, before that. You're gonna be excited to get the report of how much interest you get in this. This will be this is a fun thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's.
Great, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
We saw it.
Well, right, but, yeah, like, yeah,
That's very well explained.
it was actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is hard to
It
understand.
is,
Yep.
yeah.
Right now?
No,
Okay.
whenever you do it. And I don't need a paper copy, just email mine.
Right? Same. Yep, like, ooh, print that.
All right, we'll move on to item 9.6, and that's to establish thresholds for approval for change orders.
Well, I think, Buildings and Grounds Committee spent some time talking about this with Preston, about some of the different options we have. I did, I just Googled something, put it into that, agenda analysis as an option. We do not have to go forward tonight. If we want to discuss this further, make sure we understand. I think one of the things that was important is, the Buildings and Grounds Committee wanted to make sure that you folks felt involved and they weren't the ones making all the decisions on the building. So,
And the one you're going off of is the second copy in the board book, right?
and did I not remove the old one?
There's two of them.
All right.
The one from this afternoon.
Yeah, there should be one this afternoon.
So did you talk about this last meeting? I apologize about that.
It's very brief. I don't think we're talking any numbers, I don't think.
Okay, so yeah,
Just the
to
possibility.
keep the project moving along without too much, the board having to get together every time there's a change, he recommended we set thresholds in which administration and Rich, and then a committee of people that are made up of board members could authorize changes without the whole board convening. Sometimes, just to keep things moving, otherwise we'll be gridlocked every time we have to convene a board every 3 days. So the limits at the time he recommended were 25,000 and 100,000 for 25,000 for administration, 100,000 for the building girls, maybe with the selected committee being as kind of a natural fit for them. At the Building and Grounds Committee, we discussed it at length with Preston. I think at the time, the thought was, at least my thought was, and I think I was probably the driver behind it, $100,000 is a lot of money. And if we have 10 change orders over the course of the project, there's $1 million being approved without full board oversight. So, I don't know that I'm not comfortable with that, but for the remaining board members who aren't part of the Building and Grounds Committee, I didn't feel right saying that we should do that without talking about it with everybody first. So, that's where the $75,000 was kind of a consensus of some thought 50, some thought 100, so we met in the middle of 75,000. So that's where we're here talking about it with you tonight. So I put it on the board agenda as an action item, so we could discuss it. If everybody is comfortable with it as presented, we can move forward. If we need more time to think about it, or we need time to consider different numbers, we could certainly table it for another time. So that is the background of what this is about. So what would happen was any change orders up to 25,000, Rich would have the authority to approve those, and then we would bring them back to the board for ratification after the fact. Rich has stated that he would still run all of those change orders through the Building and Grounds Committee via email, so that he's got more than one eye taking a look at it to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed on those. Conversely, the $75,000 ones, we would have to get together as a Building and Grounds Committee, probably again by email most times, unless it warrants getting together in person. And we would consider those and approve those and then ratify those as a full board at a later date. But at that time, the wheels would already be set in motion for that work, would be already authorized, and we would be ratifying after the fact. So, question is everybody comfortable with that process? One. And two, is everybody comfortable with the amounts? Is it too much or is it not enough? Those are my questions, our questions.
What were Jim's reasons for 100,000 versus 75?
It was Preston.
Oh, Preston.
Preston's reasons were just because things could get up to that threshold, and he's hoping to keep things moving along as well as he can.
Okay.
Yeah, you
So-
would have to, you don't wanna hold things up, otherwise we'd
Right.
have to have a meeting to
Right.
approve.
But that's why, because he's the expert in this, so
Yeah.
I was wondering.
Yeah, I think his areas of concern would be differing site conditions with the soil conditions of the rock or contaminated soils, if any. They don't know that yet, but he's just, being pragmatic about it. It could be a thing. The second piece is, once we get into the portion of work where we are renovating the existing building and or connecting the new buildings to the existing building, we could run into conditions that are unexpected with the state of the building, connections with utilities, whatever those items could be when we're connecting to the building. Could get to be some, change orders in that area, possibility.
So could we instead up this to 100,000, but then put in a limit of once the change orders reach $1 million, we revisit this authority?
We could do anything we would like, yes.
And then that lets us have that limitation of 1 million, like you were. But if we have 30 change orders to get there, if we have, we kind of, we know we've hit 1 million, so then we decide at that point in time, do we continue with this, or?
Well, I think you could revisit it on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Preston's not tied to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right, but we could trigger this as an automatic review with the board saying, hey, we've hit 1 million.
This is our
Change
internal
order.
policy that we
Right.
set. We could change it at any point in
But
time.
we still give you the 100,000 up until we hit that 1 million. Then we bring it to the board as a question saying, hey, we've hit 1 million. Do we want to continue? Do we not want to continue? It just gives us that kind of stopgap, a quick check for everybody to say, oh, we've hit 1 million? Okay, that's,
Yeah, you wouldn't even need it in that. You could at the next board meeting say, hey, we've already reached $500,000. We need to revisit this.
right. We could
This
do
is
that,
not
change it any
reasonable.
time.
Of course, every project is specific on its own, right? It's got its own story. Historically, on a project like this, I did ask Preston how many change orders would reach this threshold. And he thought that maybe 20% of the change orders may reach the above 20,000 threshold, and maybe 10% would reach the above 50,000 threshold.
And he wasn't against our 75,000 either.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, he had a number that was there. I think either way, we're safe between the two of them. But I do like your idea, or like Rich said, even monthly. I mean, if somebody comes with $100,000 change order, obviously, we gotta be comfortable doing it, or we're gonna have to sit down and have a conversation anyhow. But if it's something that has to be done to keep the project going and it makes sense, I mean, if everybody's comfortable with us.
What was the number that Preston said for admin or for Rich?
25,000 is his.
That was,
That was
okay,
it.
that was the same,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't know if there was a difference in numbers there.
No.
And part of that is Rich's comfort too, is he comfortable making the
Right.
decision above
Mhm.
25,000 on everyone's behalf?
But that's where Rich did assure that obviously we're gonna
we're gonna hear about it, whether it's through
Right.
an email or a text.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's not that we're putting a ton of pressure on Rich, he's gonna have enough pressure on him the way it is, so.
Okay.
Mhm.
Petty cash.
Pocket change.
Maybe for you.
No. Not, it's far too much.
I mean, I would guess we could set a cap, or we can set it the way we have it, and we can tend to monitor this month to month. And if somebody's like, wait a minute, what's going on? We can readdress it, but
Yeah,
I hope we don't get.
Yeah, this is a worst
Yeah.
case scenario, right? Or, I mean,
Right.
change orders are gonna happen, every project has them,
Mhm.
it's gonna happen.
Mhm.
But
The percentage of them happening sounds like it could be pretty low too, right?
Yeah,
So,
or at least for large.
right,
Yeah.
the large,
Yeah.
larger numbers, yeah.
Yeah, and this is just something I pulled off the internet for wording. You know, you had some questions about that. It's an emergency.
yeah, the emergency provisions piece of the wording, which is item 2 there.
Mhm.
I don't know what emergency things we would have take place.
Outside of that normal change order. And because it's not
It's
any
kinda-
more than the
Yeah,
25.
it's kinda redundant.
Well, unless you have an official change order process, right, versus someone's on
this
site
happened
and something just
immediately.
happened and I need money, we need to make this
Mhm.
right, but.
And here's the other thing too, we don't have to rush into this. We can use this as a boilerplate and talk about it next month. If you want me to present something to press, to say, hey, what do you think of this language here? And he's probably just gonna say it's an internal process.
I mean,
I
this
feel like
is
we don't
this
need
is
to
just
cut off
ours,
this.
Yeah,
so,
this is
Yeah.
our piece, yeah.
Like, do we have to like be so caught up on this, like?
no.
Well, he was hoping that we,
Trust Rich and then
Yeah.
trust Buildings and Grounds
Mhm.
to
yeah,
Mhm.
approve this and just keep the rest of the board in, you know, so we all know what's going on.
Mhm.
Right. Well, and if we don't know, then we can always pull.
Right, exactly, but I think, I like what Matt said, you know, revisiting this, you know, month to
Mhm.
month, but why not make it 100,000 and, you know, we can revisit it if it gets too, if there's too many of them or too crazy or, you know, and mentally would be fine with that, I guess.
And we were comfortable with that as long as
yeah.
Mhm.
you guys were.
Yeah.
I mean, we maybe backed it down just because we thought it was getting kinda high, but
Mhm.
it's kinda up to the rest of us.
So do we,
I mean,
is this a motion item, do you need a motion for that?
Yeah, this is an action item,
It
so
is an action
we
item.
could make a motion for whatever we see here, or whatever we wanna change.
Go for it, Matt. You came up with a good scenario.
Right.
That's why I called it.
What do you
Go
say?
for it.
All right. I'll make a motion to approve the construction thresholds with the upper limit raised to 100,000 and an automatic review of the policy, which would require full board reapproval once we really reach $1 million in change orders.
I'll second. Whatever he said.
You
Yell
know,
that
like
Denise? Nope, I'm gonna watch back
She's
tomorrow.
recording. That's how we're doing
That was
it.
quite the motion.
All right.
Yeah, and then process and documentation, doesn't necessarily have to be part of that. And same with the emergency provisions right now, there is,
So you still want that included then?
no, it wouldn't have to be. Before we probably are going to need a change order, I'll run this by Preston anyway.
Yeah,
We could redo it in October if we don't like it, or Preston doesn't like how it's worded.
Yeah.
mhm.
So we propose an amendment to the motion, or would you revise?
Well,
No, he didn't say anything about the process.
so that would naturally lead.
Emergency provision.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to go with the threshold of $25,000 for Rich and $100,000 for finance committee, you said the maximum on that? The maximum of up to $1 million worth of change orders?
Total change,
Total change orders, does that include Rich's or just the building and grounds?
total.
Total, so $1 million total change orders.
And that will force us to have to reapprove it at that point in time.
Okay. At which time it would need to be reapproved.
Right.
Okay. Does that make sense, Denise? No? Yes? Okay. All right. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no? That carries. Thank you, that was great discussion, I appreciate that. All right, we will circle back up to item number 8, district reports, Superintendent Schneider.
Okay, so Jeremy Wilcox applied for a technology grant, and right now we have initial approval for up to 44,000, but up to 50,000.
So if we do end up spending more than what I've given them quotes on, we can go up to 50,000.
And that would cover some PA system upgrades, and then we looked at additional bells, ringers or upgrades to those, which could impact our after-school program.
And it'll pay for our security liability, or security insurance for the year.
Cyber
Cyber,
insurance,
yep.
so. Okay, so, they had their first American Indian Parent Advisory Council meeting last week, so we're ramping up for activities for October 13th, where, we'll do some things with tribal sovereignty, using Adam Savriago and, at least one other, local expert. So then they also discussed about what we'll do in November. We're gonna have Indigenous Games for November 3rd and 4th, and then November 7th is, in-service day, where we'll have national speaker Anton Troyer, for our staff. Policy Committee, what date works? Some apologies, kinda have shuffled that around. Now, are there certain dates that do work? Obviously this week is out on Wednesday night because we have negotiations. It's the first, is there anything already on the first?
First is finance.
Finance Committee, so the first is Alan. About the 8th.
Eighth would work.
8th works, so we will reschedule the policy committee meeting to the 8th. So we'll look at that, or work on that. Negotiation meeting is this Wednesday, so we'll have some information, but it's not likely we will have any proposals from either side that night. But first meeting, ground rules. I talked a little bit about the November 7th in-service training. We may ask to shift the PLCs from that November 7th to another date. Right now, we think we have a solution, but we don't have it locked down. But I should be able to bring any change in scheduling to you in October. Building update, Wendell Architects was here last week, Wednesday and Thursday, to meet with different groups of people. They also presented to the Facilities Committee. A couple of you were there, so thoughts or comments about that? What you thought?
That was the first one I sat through. I thought it went well. One of the things that I know was talked about is like drop off. People are curious of what's happening. Other than that was little discussions. I kind of felt good stuff, so.
Yeah, it was, everyone was really supportive of it. They had that one question about drop-offs, which kind of seemed to be the biggest question about how that would work. But when that was explained, everyone seemed satisfied with that explanation of how it would work for drop-offs. Jim did mention that this is the time to make any changes if we really want any drastic changes, and that the meetings with staff were going well. They had met with the middle school, or the elementary school that day, and then they were meeting with the high school the following day. Sounded like they were getting some good impact. It was asked about classrooms on the elementary side. They said that those spaces, because they're asked about, well, what if we start to grow and we need to add on? The elementary school will be somewhat overbuilt for our estimated 10% increase just because of where class levels are. And then high school, we'd have room in the parking lot to the east for that.
It's a good question.
And I know one person did mention that, you know, maybe we should consider building 2 stories on the elementary side so that we could add on the wing side later on instead of building the wing down a level with 2 stories there. We'd do 2 stories on the front section of the building, which would be even with the high school side, because the high school is 2 stories now. Not that we really wanna completely change everything, but that was mentioned that that would be another thing to consider, and maybe to talk to Jim about doing that. And that was brought up after the facilities meeting, but I just figured I'd mention it here as something to consider.
Question did come up about whether we would have additional board meetings. We don't know, of course, but we'll have to be ready for that possibility.
When we've already had.
I think that we're all ready and prepared. for that,
Exactly,
so.
we're expecting them, so, yeah.
All right. As soon as I have a little bit better plans, I'll share them with you. I don't have anything electronic right now. Denise has a set of paper ones on her back desk back there that we're just kind of playing with right now. So, a lot of things still up in the air, so you don't want to get people too territorial. Where's my room gonna be? I picked out my room, sort of stuff. So, I have heard that. They have not picked out their rooms yet. So, we had an MDE kickoff event for our targeted services, so we were identified for targeted service support from MDE. Right now, it looks like that'll be a couple hours each month. We'll be in that for 3 years, no matter what. Even if we show significant gains, we're still going to be in that support from them for 3 full years. So, quite a few schools down there. But you'll probably eventually get information, especially as we go through what formerly was called our World's Best Workforce Report in the next few months here. You'll get an update on how we qualified and what that looks like. All right? That's all I have for my report.
Any questions for Superintendent Schneider? Hearing none, we can move over on to committee reports for the building and grounds.
You do an excellent job.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Very kind of you.
Did I hear it?
It's been a minute since we had that meeting, so let me refresh my memory. We did meet with Ari Morton, talked to Preston. It was both committee thresholds that we discussed tonight, so I don't think we need to talk about that too much. The proposed building schedule, there is a link there with the proposed building schedule that you can see, so if you have any questions from the public, that's kind of a rough outline of what we expect as far as timelines. We talked about a property, is it property tax or was it sales tax?
Sales tax.
Okay, it says here property tax, but it was a sales tax, so. Discuss with Preston the possibility of a sales tax rebate that we could possibly receive for our project. However, don't get too excited about that yet. That rebate would have to be approved by the state legislature as part of a bill. So, we would need to lobby some legislators to get that added in there, and they would need to approve that as part of their appropriations bill. So some schools, it's been a while since anybody's approved it. Some schools have had their language in the appropriations bill, and when it came down to the end, it was written out as part of the cuts in that bill. So, but we thought it was worth our time to try and get it, because it could be up to $1.2 million worth of savings, back to us if we could get that, so it's worth our time to try. So, and Preston was working on that, because he drafts some of the language, is that my understanding right there? And to get that in there, so.
Need to just keep talking to them about it.
Yep.
Keep it on the radar.
Yeah, so if we were to receive that, Preston would have to be instrumental in helping us figure out what is applicable for that, because it's only for materials. So he would have to help sort out the bills and what part of that tax is a rebate and what's not. So if we were to get that, there would probably be some cost to him for that, just because that takes an exorbitant amount of time to piece all of that together. So if we were to be lucky enough to receive that, I think that would be worth the cost. We discussed the AIA contract a little bit. And then he discussed what he would have on site. So for his project management staff, there would be one person on site to begin with, for the new demolition and new construction pieces of the project. At the time, we would have to remodel the 60 building and 80 gym. That work would be going concurrently with the building of the new elementary school portion of the project. So there would be two project managers on site, one to oversee the construction and one to oversee the renovation project, because that renovation has to happen in a pretty tight time frame, so we can try to minimize student impact. So there would be two people on site at that time. Now his cost is, already got that calculated into it, he figured, but he was just kind of letting us know how the project management of it would go. There was a reminder from Rich that the building project could adjust the school calendar, so we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. We may need to think about those types of things. We talked about a geodetic marker. So if anybody doesn't know, the USGS, the U.S. Geological Service, has geodetic markers that have been established all across the country, and they're a little brass disc, and one of them is in the corner of the 1930 building, in the very west end, southwest corner of the west wing. So if we remove the building, that marker will have to go away. It's not a very complex process. We just need to let them know it's disturbed, and then they mark it on there as disturbed or removed in their record.
We did receive notice on Friday,
Okay.
late Friday, about 5 o'clock Friday afternoon, that it has been moved a few times, and so they are already considering it a loss.
Okay,
So,
good to know. Might be worth saving and putting it in.
yeah, they either want it back or to be buried with the building, right? That's how I do it.
Unless I end up with it.
Yeah, when they don't. I've seen them buried in farm fields before upside down, so.
How big are they?
And then they've got like a, just an anchor on the back of them that's built into it.
Huh,
It's
okay.
it's a cast brass disc with an anchor. It's cast into it.
Interesting.
We went over the capital outlay budget a little bit more with the devices as far as laptops. We're over budget on the devices, so there was a question from the committee of what was the reason for the overrun. So the committee explained a little bit more, or Rich and Jeremy explained a little bit more that the overrun was due to some additional laptops that were found to need to be replaced, as well as some docking stations and some monitors. So there was a little bit more cost there, budget on that. Update on the fire alarm, that it continues to be a pain in the butt, and there's not really a fix for it, so we're just gonna have to trudge along with it until it's gone. So, Rich and Jeff keep getting the irritant calls on that. Paging update, we talked about the grant that we could get, Jeremy got the grant, so I thank you very much for working on that. So that will update the paging system in both buildings. And then that will allow a connected paging system, correct, with both buildings, so if there was a need to page both buildings at the same time, we could do that.
And we made sure to go with stuff that would go to the new building.
Who's doing the work?
What's that? Oh, good.
Tech.
The people we talked
Tech.
about, the school board.
Check, tech check,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, one more
Oh,
time.
good.
tech check.
Tech check, okay.
It's actually.
Maybe you weren't there when we were talking about it.
No, I don't think I was. I don't know, you guys lost me or something.
We were getting
Nice.
chip clips maybe.
I was getting. No, just to let you know, I'm almost out of those, so I need some.
Yeah, me too. I disappeared fast.
Did you know?
We discussed the Martin Marietta lease. There is a section of property that's on the west side of the driving range grounds, Prairie Smoke, that we lease from Martin Marietta for $1. And there was talk about, do we need to keep that? There's been some, their safety directors had some heartburn with us maybe burning on that land. I don't know, for $1, the committee thought maybe we should just keep it. There's no harm in keeping it. So, that or let it go. So, maybe that was just me. I don't know. Okay.
There's a
Okay,
consensus.
it was
You're good.
consensus, good. So, either way, we thought we should probably redo that lease for $1. So, I think for burning it, it could be a safety issue that maybe the fire chief could help. Talk through with Martin Marietta.
You don't know?
I might know who that could be.
You do that.
Then we talked about possibilities for the maintenance shop option. That would need to get worked on sooner than later for a location for our maintenance personnel to go. Because in order for the high school to be built, we have to make room, which means our maintenance shop has to move. So there's a couple different options. One was a building on the east side of Granite Street, which is the one that runs up to the KCC. We still have to just explore rock removal and options there. The other one was to do a building that was tied to storage building for the track, which would be on the west side of Granite Street.
So what's the latest on that?
We really haven't progressed
You haven't?
anymore, because there,
Did they just?
as you can see, a bunch of surveying has been done,
Has it? Okay.
and I don't know where the soil boring.
So that's all being done, okay,
We just talked about the various pros and cons, but nothing was landed or
got it.
just thought about too hard. A lot of it waiting for that information from the survey and so forth. Other than that, that was it.
Good job.
Thanks. So any questions on that? All right, hearing none. We've got no discussion items. No correspondence. Our upcoming events are the policy committee meeting October 8th. Okay. The finance committee is October 1st at 5:30. There's an early dismissal on October 3rd at 1 p.m. Our next board meeting is October 13th, at 6 p.m. There's no school for staff development on October 15th, and there's no school for EM break on October 16th to the 17th. We have no other business to discuss, so we are adjourned.